very much. Well, Friday means one thing for us on the business team here at Radio 4's Today programme. It is time for the Friday Boss Slot, where we give leading industry figures a little bit more time to talk to us about the latest in their sector. Dr Michael Arumemi-Ikhide is Group CEO and President of Arik Air Limited, which is Nigeria and West Africa's largest airline. Now, he set up the firm in 2007. Its headquarters is in London. I'm delighted to say he's with us here in the studio. Michael, welcome. It cannot have been easy in 2007 as a Nigerian firm asking to borrow money.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Just a couple of very quick corrections there. We are actually based and headquartered in Lagos, Nigeria, and started operations back in 2006. Our international headquarters is in London, UK, and we set that up in 2007. But thank you. You make a very good point. It wasn't easy starting this operation, but let's look at what augurs well for the African continent and Nigeria in particular. Africa is experiencing one of the fastest growth spurts in the world with GDP growing at nearly 5%, second only to the Asia-Pacific region, and it's really been a sea change in the kind of perceptions that were assigned with Africa in terms of poverty and underinvestment. Things have really changed phenomenally, and if we even look at the amount of foreign direct investment that's coming into the region, it's grown from a base of 1.1 billion to Nigeria a decade ago to over 43 billion today. So it speaks to the level of opportunity that's been identified in that sector, and the appetite for business and investment has really changed. So if we look at even the aviation sector as it is now, that's one of the fastest growing areas as well for passenger movements in the world, second only to Asia. We're seeing, particularly in the Nigeria sector, passenger movements growing at a compound annual rate of over 10.2% per year.
Is this within Africa's short haul or long haul outside?
This is actually within, and it's a good question. We're looking at that. Most of the movement in Africa is actually from long haul travel, but what we're seeing is a real growth in intra-African movement as well, which was always sort of the bane of African transportation with the deficiency in air transport infrastructure for a long time. But I must say that going back to your question about financing, prior to 2006, yes, it was almost impossible to get the sort of attention from the credit agencies for not only supporting aviation, but let alone supporting aviation in the Nigerian market with the perceived political security risk and the weak infrastructure and issues of corruption. However, I think the government agencies and private sector have done a lot in terms of structural and regulatory reforms, in terms of the initiatives, in terms of corruption and anti-corruption movements, in terms of addressing security concerns with police reforms and poverty initiatives to alleviate a lot of that. And you can see also signing up to instruments like the Cape Town Convention, which gives security for credit agencies and lessors for the placement of the aircraft, has really gone a long way to support that industry.
You've mentioned the infrastructure challenges there. That's not just getting to airports and airports being well run, but also mobile phone penetration is lower than it is, for example, in Western Europe, quite considerably, obviously, and access to the internet. That presumably presents you with challenges too.
Yes, that's quite right. But we've got to look at this. We're starting from a low base, you're quite right, but I think the important thing to focus on is the projection and the trend. We're starting absolutely from a low base, but if you look at Africa, Africa has 650 million mobile phone users. Again, it's the fastest growing market, second to Asia. So although we're coming from a low center, if you look at the pace of growth, which is a good indication of the growth of the middle class segment, it augurs very well. Look at Nigeria, for instance. Mobile phone penetration is effectively up to 70%, which is at 115 million people. Internet penetration, which is normally a very good proxy for the size in the middle class in developing countries, is about 30%, representing about 50 million people, and is growing rapaciously. So to me, I hear what you're saying, but I think what is the success story about Arik and Nigeria and Africa as a whole is the speed at which it's recovering and joining the global economy.
I may be misquoting Richard Branson if I said that he said that the easiest way to make $1 million was to start with $1 billion and buy an airline. That's obviously not how you feel. You set it up with your father. I'm assuming that you're still speaking to each other.
Absolutely. That's a very good. That's a very good adage. Yes, Richard Branson's quote often makes me laugh, but he had a real kernel of truth in what he was trying to say there. The only thing I would say is that is true. However, we're fortunate to be able to start this in the African center and where the real market opportunity exists. And so for us, like I said, I mean, even not just airlines, you look at any business. I mean, you look at private equity funds as well. They're looking at annualized returns on private equity holdings in Africa, particularly in the Nigerian sector, of 11.2% returns. I mentioned the growth rate and the opportunity there. So if you are going to start an airline, you couldn't do it in a better place.
Michael, I wish you luck. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.